that surprise, like, wait, what? Like reaction, it's going to spark a lot of conversation. In this video, I'm going to give you 3 of what I'm calling curiosity catalysts. These are things that jumpstart visitor interactions and make it more likely that people are going to participate and have fun and hopefully think a little bit more deeply. These are really useful in the process of facilitating dialogue. And in another video, I go over my 3-step formula for facilitating dialogue, which is this process of asking meaningful questions and actively listening to visitors. So go check that out. I'll put a link below. But what I'm talking about today is redesigning the part before the dialogue so that we are doing a better job of really piquing curiosity and getting people really hooked from the beginning. And when we train people to facilitate dialogue, we often don't pay enough attention to this part, and that is why I wanted to give it a more in-depth look today. Now, you do need to know some basics about the psychology of curiosity, specifically as it relates to teaching. I also made a longer video on that. But for the purposes of this video, you just need to know that in essence, we pique curiosity by purposefully creating an information gap for visitors. This is something that they don't know, the information gap. We want to really go beyond the trivial kind of information that visitors will ask us about and really make them curious about something deeper. So that actually does require some design. You've got to give them this new information in a way that leaves something missing, okay? Some kind of yearning to know in their minds. And you know, our brains get into this state when there is something that is surprising or unusual or highly related to themselves or makes them wonder what's going to happen next. Right? There's just all kinds of ways to catalyze curiosity in the museum context. So needless to say, there are many types of curiosity catalysts to specifically use to get dialogue going in museums, but I'm showing you just 3 that I really like in this video. All right, let's get started. Okay, the first curiosity catalyst is the surprising pairing. Okay, this is when you are bringing 2 or more unexpected things together that would just normally not be seen together. Some kind of really odd juxtaposition. So here's a specific example. One of my clients is Jamestown Yorktown Foundation in Williamsburg, Virginia, and they are designing a dialogue around the story of Pocahontas. And it's just this really stark difference between these 2 clothing items that really draws people in. I've seen people walk all the way across, the Powhatan village to see what the heck this is. You know, you can see in this picture, Parker is the guide here, or the facilitator, and he's standing in front of an animal hide. So, I mean, this red Elizabethan style dress is really going to stand out in that environment, which is this recreated Powhatan village. What's going on here is the visitor is going to be subconsciously thinking, wait, what is that? What's that dress doing here? It doesn't belong here, right? And then when they find out that this is what Pocahontas wore, and that's not what they think of when they think of Pocahontas, they're like, wait, what? And that's exactly what you want right there. That surprise, like, wait, what? Like reaction, it's going to spark a lot of conversation. In this case, the deeper conversation that they're having with visitors is to examine how we know what we know. You know, how people throughout history have used images and clothing for certain agendas, and how we are doing that today. So it's really shaping up to be a really great dialogue that they're working on there at Jamestown Settlement. Now, if you don't have the ability to stage a surprising pairing like this, maybe you don't have the decision-making power to alter an exhibit or a setting. There are actually still ways to do it. You can bring your own surprising visual aid that just makes sure that it contrasts strongly with either the environment or what the exhibit is showing. Okay, on to curiosity catalyst number 2. This one is game or challenge. Game or challenge. Now, there are so many examples for this type, really. I had a lot of trouble choosing, but I did land on this game that is set up at the Smithsonian Museum of American History in Washington, D.C. And it has a really familiar format that everyone seems to understand and want to play, which is why I think it works so well. They use a tournament bracket. Now, if you play sports or follow sports, you've definitely seen one of these. But when you figure out who's going to win the championship of basketball or whatever, but instead of tracking which team is going to win, the bracket helps organize competing ideas that are designed to answer a question. So what they do is they pose a question at the top of the tournament bracket. In this case, they're using the question, which food is more American? And then, it's populated with all these different foods on each side of the bracket. And then people sort of play foods against each other until they have a winner. And now, observing what happens with this, I've seen families and groups of visitors really have deep conversations about what it means to be American, and they tell stories to each other about their experiences with food. It's great. And when the activity is facilitated, it's even better. The educator brings more complexity to it around the concept of democracy. They discuss whether people could agree on winning foods and how hard it was to build consensus in the group. So, in fact, that's what the overall exhibit is about. It's called Unity Square, and it is designed to spark civic participation. So, from a curiosity standpoint, why does this work? Games we know are engaging, but what's the curiosity part? Really, essentially, it's just because we want to know what's going to happen in the end. That's the information gap, right? And this game is so great at that for so many reasons, but you could use the tournament bracket idea in your own museum. Smithsonian has actually created a teacher lesson plan for this if you want to see how they did it and give it a try, and I will drop a link. As you can probably guess, there are really a lot of other games and challenges that do the same thing. They pique curiosity because we want to know how it ends, what's going to happen. But 2 tips I'll give you about games and challenges. 1, keep them simple enough to understand right away. You don't want a bunch of complicated rules. And 2, the game should not require much prior knowledge to play. And the reason that this bracket about food works is because everybody eats, and so everybody has opinions about that. But I have seen the bracket be used for other things like, most influential Black American or something like that. But that does require you to know a little bit about each person on the bracket, and so I've seen a lot more, problems in getting folks to talk unless they are subject experts about that, and you've already done a lot of, teaching about it. So just a couple of tips. Okay, on to our last curiosity catalyst, number 3. I wanted to include at least one technique here that requires absolutely no supplies or materials, and that is voting or polls, taking a poll. It's extremely easy to vote or take a poll just by asking for, a show of hands. So it's really easy. This technique can be used in a couple different ways. First, you can use it to start your discussion to get people invested in the topic. So before you say anything about the content at hand, you could say something like, raise your hand if you consider yourself someone who follows the rules most of the time, right? Like something that they know about themselves, so they can obviously answer. Now, the information gap that this creates is in visitors. They're wondering, even if they don't know they're wondering this, they're wondering, where is she going with this? Like, how does this question about whether I'm a rule follower relate to this artifact I'm seeing, or, whatever the topic is? So then you might explain a situation that complicates the idea of rules being valuable or not valuable, a story, and then ask if the situation changes their vote or changes their mind. So take a second poll at the end. And you've kind of, bookended the interaction with a poll at the beginning and one at the end. So that's one way you can use polls. Another way to use voting or polls is to tell visitors that in a few minutes, you're going to ask them to vote on something. And this puts their brain in a sort of state of curiosity automatically. They're what are they going to ask me to vote on? Like, I better listen. And then you present, again, a very specific story about when a person broke the rules, or use some other topic. It doesn't have to be about rules. But then ask them to place their vote. Raise your hand if you think that this person should have followed the rules, right? And then they are ready for that vote because you told them that it was going to happen. They've been thinking and considering their perspective, so it really works. So now you're ready to facilitate a great dialogue, and people really do want to talk. Now, if you do have the resources or the ability to create a way for people to like physically vote, like with maybe a token that they have to place in a container or something like that, or draw a hash mark, something like that, it can actually make it even more interesting. There's just something really powerful about, not just thinking about what you would do in your head or your vote, but actually having to physically commit to it. Just something powerful about that. Now, one tip, if you want a really nuanced conversation, which I think you do, feed them some conflicting information before they rate or vote something. Make it difficult, because in real life, things are rarely clear cut, and we want to also like purposefully try to bring out these differing perspectives in a dialogue. Okay, so like I said, there are really many curiosity catalysts out there. There's rating systems, there's storytelling, there's imagination exercises, just so many more. So if you're interested, I can do another video with more of them, but just remember what you're trying to do is to create an information gap, this feeling of wanting to know what's going to happen. Catalyzing curiosity is a step that is often overlooked in our tours because we are so excited about this stuff that we just want to tell them everything, right? But if you find ways to design for curiosity, you'll have people wanting to really dig in and talk to each other and hopefully come away with a new perspective and an opened mind, which is, really what we want. So try out one of these curiosity catalysts or design your own and let me know how it goes. Put your feedback right here in the comments, and I will see you next time.